Installing and configuring Hyprland on Arch. One very important thing before we begin: mindset. Remember, it's learning how to apply vastly different concepts like mindset and psychology to the most niche topics like rising Hyperland, for example, that's truly going to get you places. It's why you bought the program in the first place. Anybody can teach you the exact steps of type this command into your terminal and do this, do that, but literally no one else is teaching you how to actually think. In today's world and education system, we are being taught what to think and not how, and the latter is infinitely more important. So, what's the mindset you're supposed to have when you're building a setup of your own? It's important to consider your goal, your North Star, your Polaris Star. You see, sailors back in the day used the North Star to figure out where they were headed so that they wouldn't get lost. It'd be very difficult for them to get from one place to the other if they didn't have a North Star. Now, here's an action step. Break out a pen and a piece of paper or a text file and write down your main objective for creating a Hyperland setup. It could be to learn a new skill, sharpen your existing skills, build something minimal so that you don't get distracted as easily, or have lots of info coming at you if you so choose. Whatever your reason, write it down. Writing things down, digitally or physically, is akin to pretty much boosting the chances of you actually following through with whatever you wrote down by about 80% in my experience. It really works. So, pause the video right now and write down your reason for sitting through these modules and learning how to make your own setup. Not only is this going to make things much clearer for you when you're actually doing the research and looking for stuff to add to your config online, this will help you in other aspects of your life too. Let's say, for example, that you want it to be more fit. How you do one thing in life is how you do another. I cannot emphasize just how true this is. I've personally experienced it time and time again. If you're setting goals and sticking to them, referring back to them again and again, your brain starts to pick up on that. It's a pattern recognition beast. So if you start plotting down exactly what you want to achieve in making your setup, same transfers over to other parts of life. So you start doing the same in fitness and in work, and before you know it, this program about rising Hyperland has changed your life for the better. So, if you still haven't written at least one line, one objective as to what you want, write it down now. It will most definitely help you more than any other YouTube tutorial you could watch on any topic. If we're unable to achieve something in life, it's almost never because of the tools that we're using. It's because we haven't taken the time to be creative enough to make a solution of our own to the problem we're facing. So don't make the mistake of blaming your tools when something doesn't work. Blame yourself. Blaming yourself and taking responsibility is a surefire way to get better. Now, to show you what I had in mind when I wanted to make my own setup, here is what I got. I wanted something minimal while still looking aesthetic, so this is the setup I made. As you can see, we have Material U colors theming the entire system based on the wallpaper. We have Waybar up at the top, the pill-shaped workspaces, and the rest of the modules like little islands being suspended. Then on the right, we have notifications along with a media widget inside Sway and C. That's what the notification center is called. This was one setup. Now, I decided that things would be even better off looking a bit more minimal, so I decided to make this setup. So here we have a bit of a Mac OS aesthetic. At the top right, we have the date and the time, and a couple of icons, nothing much. Left, workspaces, and the launcher icon. Launcher icon I just pretty much don't use. It just looks a bit nice there, so I thought, why not keep it? This is a transformation that has happened from BSPWM 3 years ago in around April 2022. This is the setup that I had. Tomorrow night color scheme, polybar at the bottom, nothing too fancy again. And these were all the applications. Alacrity with JetBrains Mono Nerd font, I think the font was, yeah. And some transparency using PyCom. We didn't have rounded corners back then in the X11 days, so this is what we had. It worked, it got the job done while still looking minimal, so that's great. Okay, now to actually show you how to get started with installing Hyperland, you need to do a couple of things. When you have entered into your TTY, you're just going to see a blank screen along with a prompt. When you're there, all you have to do is just type in Hyprland. We install Hyprland using yay-s if you have already installed yay, but if you haven't installed yay, you can just do it using pacman. So pacman-s, Hyprland, and kitty. Kitty is going to be our terminal. Hyprland is going to be the actual Wayland compositor that we will be using. So once you install that, if I use the -- needed flag, then it's going to, okay, here it says that I cannot perform this operation unless I'm root, so I'll just run it with sudo, type in the password. Okay, so if it's already up to date and if I've already installed it, it's going to skip it, which it will. So it's not going to install for me because it's already there. For you, it's going to install, and once you do, you just have to run Hyprland with a capital H in the TTY, and that should bring you to the Hyprland screen. Okay, so once you launch Hyprland, you should see something like this. The screen, the background might be a bit different for you, but in essence, it's the same thing. Here we have a cursor and this warning. So if you install Kitty, we have to press Super Q, and that's going to give us this terminal. I changed my shell to ZSH using chsh-s bin ZSH. Okay, and the way you actually use ZSH is first installing it. So you do sudo pacman-s zsh, and after that you would change your shell with chsh-s bin zsh, log out and log back in, and you should see a prompt like this. It might ask you that there's nothing in the .zshrc file. Just say that just create an empty .zshrc and you should be fine. So you should see a prompt like this, and then you have the ability to type stuff. Great. Now that we're here, we also had to have installed an editor. When we were installing Arch Linux specifically for Rising Hyprland, we would have installed NeoVim. So just open your config file using nvim.config hyprland.conf. You pull this up and this is what you see. This is the auto-generated config. So we can remove this line in order to remove the warning. Just remove it because we will not be using it. And there you go. Now, if you notice something else, everything is a bit too zoomed in. How do we actually fix this? Here, in the configuring monitor section, we can change stuff about the monitor. First, this determines the position of the monitor, the whatever text that you add or data that you add before the first comma. Second, determines the resolution and the refresh rate. So that would be something like 1920 by 1080, but it's already chosen that because preferred does that for you. Then after that, you have another setting, which I'm not too sure about, so you have to look that up. But the most important setting for us is going to be the scale. Now, if you're coming from Windows and you remember the fact that you had 1.25% as a scale in the display settings, this is the equivalent of that in Hyprland in Linux. So this is the same as 125% scale on Windows. Okay, great. But what if you just wanted no scaling? No scaling so that none of your applications were broken, because well, as you tend to use fractional scaling, as this is called, so the 1.25, 125% is called fractional scaling, and some applications such as those that run on X Wayland, okay, those do not support fractional scaling, and so they might end up looking weird and they might not work for you. It's either they look weird or they don't scale properly at all. So it's just going to be stuck at one scale for those X Wayland applications. And X Wayland is basically sort of this protocol thing. So it's a method using which you can run X applications on Wayland. So let's say, for example, I have installed xorg xeyes. So I have installed xorg xeyes. Okay, and the way to install yay is like so. So yay is basically you're going to be your AUR helper. We're going to have to install that because there are packages that we will have to install using the AUR, but I'll just show you how xorg xeyes works. So here we have xeyes, xorg, okay, xeyes, there you go. So as you can see, you can see the eyes following the cursor whenever you're in an X Wayland application. So if the app is running on X11, right, is running on X Wayland, you can see that the eyes move. But if we're in a Wayland environment, this app XORG X eyes cannot track that, and so the eyes stop following your cursor. So let's say, for example, I launch an app like gcolor3. Okay, gcolor3 is a color picker, and because it has a Wayland specific app, right? Because it's designed specifically for Wayland, it's not going to, XORG Xeyes is not going to be able to follow our cursor over there. Now, if we use another app, something like VS Codium, for example, VS Codium, this is the non-Wayland version, this is the X version. As you can see, it follows the cursor. It follows the cursor over here and not over here. And you remember that problem that I described, that X applications, they don't scale very well when you use fractional scaling? That's the same thing that's happening over here. So the font is pretty messed up. The font looks very blurry and it doesn't look as nice as it can over here in VS Codium on X11. Here too, you can see that the eyes are not as sharp. But if we reduce the scale to 1, right, just to 100%, the eyes become very sharp. So there's no jagged edges. And here the font gets fixed immediately. Yes, things look a little bit small, but you can always zoom in. You can't increase the size of this window, or rather you can by doing this, right? So it's not that big of a problem. You can just increase the size in the specific applications themselves. Great, so that is about fractional scaling. Now, I was also going to tell you how to install Yay, which is going to be our AOR helper. So first we will have Git, right? We already installed Git in the installation process. So we will type in git clone https:// let me just zoom in for you. Okay, Control L to clear the screen, by the way. Doesn't matter what terminal you're using. If you press Control L, it's going to clear the screen. Great. Now, aor.archlinux.org/yay-bin. Okay, just clone that here. Don't worry about this warning. It doesn't really mean anything for us. Okay. Then cd into yay-bin. Clear again and make pkg-si. Hit enter. And it's going to start installing Yay for you. Type in your password. Okay, now Yay bin and Yay git are in conflict. Do you want to remove Yay git? Now, I've already installed Yay, so it's going to show me this error, but for you, it's not going to show anything. And you're not going to be able to use sudo without configuring that. So you will have to create sudo this way. So if sudo doesn't work for you, what you have to do is add your user to the wheel group. So if you know your root password, right, type in su, enter your root password, and you get into the root account. Now here you have to type in user mod -a capital G wheel and your username. So in my case, that would be user1. This adds user1 to the wheel group. So once you add it to the wheel group, what you do is you type in editor equal to nvim sudo, or rather no sudo over here, but just type in sudo. And that should open this sudoers file. So here it says that you always have to edit this using sudo because this is a very crucial file, and if you mess something up, you can just break your system and make it pretty much useless and make it as though you can't log in. So you don't want to break anything like that, which is why sudo edits a temp file, which is then copied over to the actual sudoers file. Yeah, so as you can see here, if you don't use sudo, you may result in syntax or file permission errors that prevent sudo from running. And if that happens, you will not be able to perform any administrative tasks using sudo, and that would be a problem if you didn't know the root password. So always use sudo whenever you're editing the sudoers file, okay? Then you scroll down, just press Shift G, and that gets you all the way to the bottom. And you see this over here, uncomment to allow members of group wheel to execute any command. So this is going to be commented out. Just uncomment that. And this is also going to be commented. If you want to, you can uncomment it. This basically allows members of group sudo to execute any command. By default, the sudo group is not created and we have the wheel group by default. So you can uncomment this if you want to, but just leave it be. That's fine. Okay. Now here we allow members of group wheel to execute any command provided that they have the sudo password. Okay. So just right quit and exit and you're done. So you can just remove the yay-bin directory. Okay. And we have gotten the basic configuration done. Now, what is it that we actually have to change? We have to change the wallpaper and get a basic status bar up and running. Okay. Just to get started with customizing stuff. Let's customize the most basic things first. Okay, now before that, here they say that this is an example config file. So let's just use their examples /hyprland.conf in their repo and let's edit that instead. Okay, now we're going to need a browser. So if you want to install one, I'd recommend that you install LibreWolf because it has a lot of privacy respecting features. So it has enabled strict fingerprinting, as in strict security settings. So it disables fingerprinting and disables third-party cookies and cross-site cookies and so much more. Basically, it's a much better browser. And because of all the privacy respecting features that it has added in, LibreWolf has made it so that your browsing becomes a much faster experience. Okay, so if you have Yay, you just install it using yay-s librewolf-bin. Okay, then if you have installed Wafi, which we do like so, again, this can be installed using Pacman, but using Yay, it's yay-s Wafi. Okay. Once you install Wafi, you can press mod R by default, so super key plus R, and that gives you the run window. Here, just look for LibreWolf, hit enter, and you should see this browser. Now here we have more settings, right? We have a lot of privacy respecting features like here. This is their enhanced tracking protection. So it's set to strict right now, so it blocks all of this. Social media trackers, cross-site cookies in all windows, tracking content, crypto miners, and known and suspected fingerprinters. So basically, it does a lot of stuff to protect your privacy. On the other hand, if you use something like Google Chrome, you can basically kiss your privacy goodbye because not only is that proprietary, and so you cannot edit Google Chrome's source code, you basically have no privacy protecting features except like one or two, and even those you have to go manually and enable them. And unless you know what you're doing, you can sometimes break stuff. Now here too, this may cause some sites or content to break, but in my experience, I've been using LibreWolf for like more than a year or two now, and it hasn't failed me very often. It's just sometimes news sites and some other sites that you barely ever go onto that don't work, but you can manage. It's fine. And here you have another setting that says tell websites not to sell or share my data. You can enable that too. And you also can make it so that your browser doesn't remember anything if you close and reopen it by checking this option, delete cookies and site data when LibreWolf is closed. So yes, LibreWolf is just an amazing browser. So if you wanted to use a good browser, a fast one that respects your privacy, then LibreWolf is your go-to. Okay, now let's go to their Git repo, which is github.com/Hyprland, I believe. Okay, this is not their Git repo, so we just look for Hyprland GitHub. Okay, it's hyperwm/Hyprland, so click on that. Click on example. Okay, now here, this is the example hyprland.conf. Copy that. Okay, then let's just copy the entire thing. So go on to raw, click that raw button, right click, save page as hyprland.conf. Okay, go to user 1, press Ctrl H to show hidden folders, double click on .config, find hyper over here, and save it to hyprland.conf. So click on hyprland.conf and click save. Yes, it already exists. Do you want to replace it? Yes, I want to replace it. And once you do that, it changes a couple of things, but nothing much, right? All we have to do is just change this auto thing to 1 and we should be done. That's it. Now, as you can see here, it says that not all available settings or options are set here. For a full list, we need to see the wiki, which we will be doing. Now, another important thing that we need to configure is auto login. Now, if you're not going to use a display manager like SDDM or GDM, what you are going to have to do is set up auto login. So whenever you are on TTY1, okay, let's say you are on the first TTY, which is basically the blank screen along with the blinking prompt that you see. So if you're on the first TTY and let's say you type in your password, you type in your username and password. So I type in user1, okay, and yeah, it's going to give me an error, but that's fine. And then I type in my password, which is whatever, and then I hit enter. It's just going to automatically log me into Hyprland. I won't have to type in Hyprland every single time. Okay, the way we set that up is going to be like so. You go to your browser and you look for auto start x at login. Okay, and once you do that, you should see an Arch Wiki link. If you don't, you just have to type in Arch Wiki, and here you see this. Click on that. Okay, and if we don't see it here, which I don't think we do, all we have to do is look for the xinit ArchWiki link. So xinit ArchWiki, click on this. So you see auto start x at login, we click on that, then we see this. Now it says that we need to make sure that startx is properly configured. Okay, also, pro tip, if you are on a laptop and you are using LibreWolf, you can actually pinch to zoom. So just pinch on your trackpad and it's going to zoom accordingly. Okay, pro tip for you there. Now, instead of auto starting X, we will just be auto starting Hyprland. So copy this and paste it in. I will be explaining what it's going to do. So nvim.z profile should be empty. Just press I on your keyboard and paste it in. Also, if you're not comfortable using Vim, then you can use another editor called Nano, right? That's just installed using Nano, and you don't have any sort of powerful commands or key bindings that you can use to move around like HJKL that you have on Vim, but it's very simple to use. You can use the arrow keys to move around and get stuff done. Okay, so you can use Nano if things are a bit complicated on Vim. But here, if you're on Vim, so you just press V, highlight this, okay, then press D. You use HJKL to move around, by the way, if you're on Vim. Then you press A to start typing, and then you type in Hyprland with a capital H. Now, you just write it with :W, and it writes it for you. Now, here, if -Z $display. Now, what this does, it checks whether a string is empty. So if a string is null, if a string is empty, if this display variable doesn't return anything, and xtg underscore vtnr equals 1. So you can basically just abstract this to tty number. So if the display variable is empty, if it's null, and if we are on tty1, then exec Hyprland, then just execute Hyprland. Okay, so ordinarily, if you execute the display variable, or rather echo it, if I just echo display, it's going to give you :0. Okay, it's going to give you :0, which means that it's your primary display. Okay, now here, it's going to be null whenever you haven't logged in. And so this variable, the tty variable, is also going to be 1 whenever you're on tty1. Okay, and once that check is done, and if it passes the check, so if both of these conditions are true, then it's going to execute Hyprland. And that is how you set up auto login. Okay, now this is what we have so far. We have configured the scale, and no wallpaper or status bar just yet, but we have a browser, we have a file manager, which we can install using Tunar for a basic file manager that you can actually make look pretty nice. Okay, So we have that, and we have the wallpaper, which we're going to, again, set that up later. But we have all the basic essentials that we need. No status bar just yet. We will do that. Okay, now, here's another important thing. We have to install all the applications that we are going to use when ricing. So all those packages would be as follows. Make sure that you're using Yay and type in yay-s, sway and see. So this is our notification daemon. Pipewire. Pipewire is going to be responsible for our audio and screen sharing. Now, if you've installed it using the install script that we used, arch install, Pipewire is also already going to be installed for you, so no need to worry about that, but we just add it in just in case, okay? So again, if we add in -- needed, it's only going to install whatever isn't already there. Okay, the keys don't seem to be working, so I'll just use the arrow keys. Great. Then after that, we have XDG desktop portal Hyprland. Now what this is basically responsible for a bunch of things that are on your desktop. So it could be file picker windows, for example. So let's say you are asked to choose a file or choose a directory when you are going to download something from the internet. That file picker window is actually managed by XDG desktop portal Hyprland. Okay, then we have polkit gnome. So polkit gnome is going to be responsible for showing you a window that asks for your password whenever you are about to do something that requires elevation. So let's say we're about to execute the command systemctl start Bluetooth. I haven't configured Bluetooth yet, but as an example, okay? Now here it says that, okay, it's giving an error so let's just pick 2, current user. So I just type in the password and it says authentication complete. Okay, right now it's not going to give me any error, but for you, if you're using systemctl to start something, or basically something that requires root privileges, it's going to show you a window over here that says enter your password because this app is asking for authentication. So it could be, for example, pacman-s, let's install something like cmatrix. Yeah, you cannot perform this operation unless root. Now, if you have this polkit gnome app installed, what it's going to do is show you a window that asks for your password instead of just giving you an error. Okay, that's why we need polkit gnome. Then Qt5 Wayland and Qt6 Wayland. Now these two, they're not applications, they're just libraries that you would need to have Qt5 and Qt6 apps run on Wayland. Qt is a GUI framework, by the way. It's a GUI toolkit that is used for KDE apps. For example, that would be Kdenlive or Kclock. Okay, then we have NWG look. So NWG look is used to change your GTK theme and font rendering and a couple of other things. So it looks like this. Okay, NWG looks like this. Here we have the default font selected, color scheme, and we have a couple of other things that we can change. Lots of nice preferences, right? Then after that, we have SWWW. Solution to your Wayland wallpaper woes. I kid you not, that is literally the name. Okay, this is going to be for setting our wallpaper. This is one of the most powerful wallpaper setters out there because it gives you lots of animations. So you can either have the wallpaper be set from a wipe transition, so you can just have it wipe from here to here and then reveal the wallpaper, or you can have a transition that shows as if this thing is growing. The new wallpaper is growing from the center, so it just expands outward from there. And you can change a bunch more things about SWWW. So it's a very powerful wallpaper setter. Then we have Waybar. Waybar is going to be our status bar. Okay, now, depending on the status bar that you want to configure, you can either pick Waybar or HyperPanel. I will tell you more about each of the differences between the two bars, but just install both for now. Okay, then we have UDisky. In UDisky, basically, what's going to happen is this. So Let's say that you install a USB drive into your computer. It's not going to do anything unless you mount it using a series of commands like sudo mount. Let's say your device was on dev sdb1 to /mnt. Then you're supposed to go to /mnt and then figure out your stuff that you need to do over there. So /mnt would basically be your USB drive. So instead of having to manually mount that, if you install udisky and you start it up whenever you start Hyprland using the exact ones, which I will show you. Okay, so if you do that, then what happens is whenever you install any removable media, it's just going to automatically be mounted so that you can access it through your file manager. So we use udisky for that. Then we have Python Pywall 16. Python Pywall 16 for using Pywall colors. So that would be theming your entire setup from the status bar to your browser to your terminal to your file manager to pretty much everything that you can possibly think of based on the wallpaper colors. So if I picked a green wallpaper, everything would be green, red, everything would be red, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, Python Pywall 16 is one way to get those colors. Another way is through matugen bin. So if you're familiar with Android, then you know that ever since Android 12, we have something known as Material U colors. So Material U is this new design philosophy that Google has been following, where you have lots of rounded corners, lots of pill-shaped stuff, and basically a new design with colors that change according to your wallpaper. Now here, if you like Google's Material U aesthetic more than you like Pywall colors, then you can just choose that instead. I will show you how to do it again. Okay, then we have HyperIdle. HyperIdle is just for getting your system to turn off or just turn the screen off or suspend after a certain amount of time. So we need HyperIdle for that. Then HyperLock. HyperLock to lock your screen. Install all of these and log out, log back in. And in the next module, we will be covering how to slowly theme your system one by one. So first we change the wallpaper, then the status bar, then we start configuring each of the things individually until we get a more cohesive look, like the setup that you saw earlier on.